Well, welcome everybody. My name is Ken Miller. I'm the Director of Superior District Library, of which Bayliss is a branch. And I'd like to start out with some thank yous as usual. Thank you, Julie, for coming and doing this. We really appreciate it very much. Friends of the library for the refreshments. And if you look over there, there's enough refreshments for each of us to have about 45 cookies each. So that's a good thing. They're all good. The library's program committee who puts this together, Nancy Gillette, Maggie Johnson, Debbie Lehman, Ashley Bergeron, and Chair Susan James, who is on camera tonight. Thank you guys very much for the work that you do. Julie Brooks Barbour teaches composition and creative writing at Lake State University. She has an MFA in creative writing from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Her chapbook, Come to Me and Drink, was published in 2012. Julie's poems have been published in various journals and anthologies, including The Way North, collected Upper Peninsula New Works. She's co-editor of the LSSU literary journal Border Crossing. And tonight Julie will be reading from Small Chimes, her first full-length collection of poetry, and from her forthcoming book, Earth Lust, that will be out in September. Small Chimes is available for purchase after the reading tonight. And Julie, I'll bet you'll sign some of those too, right? Great, thank you. After her reading, we'll take a short break and have an open mic. There's a sign-up sheet in the back, so please sign up for open mic during the break. And please join me in welcoming Julie Brooks Barbour.
So nice, I know everybody here. Hi, Diane. Okay, let me get myself, I need a tissue, so let me get myself ready. I'm not exactly ready yet. And then I will. I will have to preface some things tonight. Not the first book I'm reading from. I won't need to preface that because that's a lot about motherhood and family. So that's pretty self-explanatory. But some of the other work, especially from the new chapbook, I'll have to preface just to kind of give you some background on some fairy tales that you might not be familiar with. But other than that, we should be good to go. And I don't try to, I'm not a modernist in the sense that I try to write poems that no one can understand. So just to kind of give you a background on the story, though, I think will be helpful. So I'm going to read from two sections of my first book. My first full-length book, Small Chimes. Tonight. So here I go. North Carolina College for Women, 1992. We knew we were women. I mean, there were boys about, and we knew that need. We also had the need to be taken seriously outside of our hometowns, away from parents and secrets that we didn't want to discuss. When we went home, we were still girls, and we didn't want that, so we didn't go. We stayed on campus for the weekend and bought greasy cheeseburgers and danced at clubs and slept with boys. But the next day, we didn't mention the boys. We shared poems and maybe the latest oil painting of a mermaid rising out of green tides. We were always broke. We walked everywhere, wanted everything. We shopped consignment and praised one another for our finds of cardigans and costume jewelry. There was so much to love except ourselves, but we never let on. Poetry and art would do. They would stand in place of self-love, and it worked. It worked so well, we never gave it up. Home economics. Across from the wood shop in a classroom lit with fluorescents, I would learn a trade, though all I knew of the kitchen and sewing machine was the breakfast in my stomach and my mended clothes. I learned little more. My biscuits cooked into the next class, dry and overdone. My apron went home without pockets. And the egg I carried around for a day, a symbol of motherhood, a friend dropped on the lunch table. At the end of the class, springtime, I stood outside in a flowered dress and pumps and chose apples for cider, handing the good ones over. That would be the extent of my knowledge, how to choose what to keep and what to leave behind. A vocabulary. My grandmother recited recipes from memory. She wrote nothing down. Even when I offered pen and paper, she insisted on speaking. Ingredients and measurements might settle into my memory if she repeated them often enough, like a spell. I refused that vocabulary. It was like science, and I only liked science when it pertained to animals and their habitats. I adopted the language of stories, took the pen and paper I'd offered my grandmother, and wrote my way out of the kitchen, away from boiling water and baking temperatures. Outside, I dug old bottles from the dirt in the chicken house, dusted the soil off their curved bodies, and traced the raised letters. I plucked stamen and stigma from passion flowers until they became dancers I twirled between my fingers. The sun's heat could bear down on me, but not the heat of the kitchen or its rules. My grandmother never stopped trying to lure me in, offering banana pudding or cherry cobbler at the end of a school day, waiting to tell me when I finished of cups measured or how much fruit to slice, but I slipped out the screen door after cleaning my bowl, my only work in that room. Honeybee, woman. Even the young workers care for the youngest. We cook, we clean, we guard the family, all in a day's work. Laundry day. Corner by corner I hang the sheets, dark blue, red, a floral print tattered at the edges. They whip themselves into one another with the breeze, sometimes twisting into a snarl. My mother would drape her white sheets 1 over 2 lines, a tent I would run through. I show my daughter what I used to do. She follows with mud under her fingernails, hair hanging in her face, her smile the same as any child dirty among the wash. Next door, my neighbor's white shirts flap like sails, armpits stained yellow. Across the street, the widow hangs her briefs to dry. It is a bright, clear day among the houses. You read loud enough to people, you understand? Okay. Opportunity. She wants to go outside. You are still in your robe. Small fingers grab the door handle and pull down, pull out. Her bare foot steps through the small space. You tug her inside and close the door. She gives a shrieking cry, the one thing she worked toward removed. Sing the waiting song, you implore, but she stares longingly past the glass door, unaware and unable to understand that you too have waited on opportunity. She thinks only of the endless possibilities, dirt passing through her fingers and water pouring cold from the spigot. I have a lot of insect poems in here. I'm only reading 2 tonight, but there's quite a few, and I'm going to read another one right now. It's called Moth. Fluttering around my garments in the closet, circling the bedside lamp, the cat will have you. Don't come in, stay out. Follow the firefly's rhythmic glow. Make friends. This home cannot offer you anything but hunger. You hear me okay? I try to project as well as I can. I'm not talking right into the microphone. Do you need me to?
No.
Does the filmmaker need me to?
Excuse me, I just wanted to see, is it on?
I have no idea, but I can't use
It's
it.
not on.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
Do you need me to talk into it? Not for that, you don't really need to? All right. I'm messing up the video already. There should be fire. It smells like fire in the study, my daughter claims. Though this fire is only the gas heat radiating through pipes in the walls because of the sudden chill outside, the bitter wind arriving with rain, cold that burrows to the bone. There is no fire in the study, though I imagine the pages of books turning to ash, brittle and black, that corner of the house charred. There is no fire in the study. I have not sat there for weeks, pulled away, but there should be a fire in the study, and it should blaze. Flames burst the window panes, lick the siding. There should be a fire so strong the whole neighborhood, the whole town would see the smoke rising skyward, and sirens would greet it. Sirens would scream its name. Now, a lot of these poems are, this book was written kind of in Lexington and kind of Lexington, Kentucky, and kind of in the Sioux. And so I can just remember a lot of the things around the Sioux that inspired these poems. And this one was inspired by a house that had burned down near Burger King. Do you know, right across from Ace Hardware, that house that burned down? And so this kind of, I don't think it's standing anymore. I think they've already bulldozed it. But yeah, I just remember all the black windows and how it looked so gutted. And I was like, oh. But we don't wish that on my house. And I'm getting kind of hot too. I think it's that poem. I am going to read some poems about winter. I know that it's not the right time to read these poems, but since we all have the same experience, I think, oh, why not? So yeah, this place has really been inspiring. I've lived here 8 years now, and I can just see it in the work. This is one of the poems that's in the Way North. It's Obods for the North, and Obod is a morning song, and there are 5 of these, and I'll give the number as I read them. Obods for the North. 1. A half hour after sunrise, crows call to each other across the tops of my dying trees, trunks blackened, infested by birch borers. The birds perch in the bare branches, voices louder than their dark bodies. When they leave, they mark the sky as they cross over tree and house and street. 2. The freighters bellow on the river, making their way back and forth between the borders. Not like the train whining in the night, announcing arrivals and departures, announcing solitary travel beyond the fields of home. The freighters call to one another, to the men waiting at the locks. Hello to the lake shore where no children wait or wave. Hello to the observation decks where no one watches. Hello to the city where men and women greet the morning only for work. 3. On this bitter morning, the sun rises over the church's rooftop, shining out of the dark. From my study window, I watch the world wait for the trees to come into view, the roof to slant itself, the window to erase my reflection. 4. Snow coats the power lines, sugars the tree trunks, the city silent except for the roar and scrape of snowplows. The air shone blue and bright when I woke, snowflakes spinning. Winter, the old pal of this place, freezes the lakes, lines the roads, mutes the echo of life. But this too is life, swirling outside, exiling birds. The land renews itself, cold and shivering. 5. Stunned awake by winter knocking at my window, I leave the bed, unable to settle down, and search each side of the upstairs for silence. At the west, the house might come crashing down. At the south, the rushing sound of water. At the northeast, a persistent roar. Snow pelts the storm windows, shaking the glass. I return to bed, expecting some terrible crash to spring me from rest. I lie awake, waiting for it, listening to every creak and crack, hoping for sleep, a release from this vigil. Yeah, you really want to think about winter when it's 75 degrees out. Mm-hmm. I can't help it. Sometimes I miss the smell of it during the summertime. I know it sounds crazy, but sometimes I think about it and I'm like, oh yeah, that is really nice until February. All right, we're going to get a little bit dark here, a little bit. But we'll come back and we'll get light again, I promise. All night. All night my husband has turned among the sheets, rising every hour to gulp cold water or watch TV, anything to mute the ascending pain he will later describe as a tearing in his skull. Roused by his groans, I click on the lamp and gasp at the sight of blood on his pillow. Punctured eardrum, we later learn in the emergency room, though he'd been waiting for the ache to explain itself before he could recognize it, wanting to answer a list of symptoms, thinking it would be certain as sunlight or snow. He never noticed the signs, the first rays of light marking clouds above the horizon, or gray sky eclipsing blue. Making a game of it. My aunt faces my grandmother's closet and pulls a bright blue blouse from the rack. She buttons the shirt over a tank top, admires the fit in a mirror, turning from side to side, a child trying on her mother's clothes. Whatever she likes, she heaps onto an armchair, and the pile begins to tumble. 10 minutes away, in her son's house on the river, my grandmother has made temporary home of a downstairs bedroom. From armchair to bed, she carries a sheet of notepaper with the word radiation written in red capital letters. If she learns to live with it, define it, perhaps it will become something anyone does, part of a life. 10 minutes away, her eldest daughter adds to a new mound on the floor. Dresser drawers unloaded, coats and shoes stacked on the bed. She has asked us to claim her belongings, make lists of the things we like, and take something tangible for memory. My aunt invites me to join her. Do I like this patterned dress, this pair of shoes? The river surged with rain on our last visit, flooding my uncle's yard. A boy in a yellow slicker leaped and splashed in the rising water with his dog. We watched them from the high windows of the house and turned my grandmother in her chair toward the sight. The sky held its darkness all weekend, no sun or stars. The house held us until the river receded. The boy and his dog made a game of the storm while they could. You see all this water? Small movements. When there is no wind, only water. When there is no movement but the tide dragging a body by the ankles out to sea, or the river filling a yard to flooding, or the simple sound of a dog lapping water from a bowl. When the sound is less than a roar, doves calling from the roof in the late morning, starlings filling the tree with creaking voices, or the dog's muted dream barking, or the shuffling feet of a nervous man as he speaks, his movement constant in the uncertainty of his own voice. Remember these small stirrings before the green water breaks over the wall, before the wind and sea become so strong you forget how to row. Northern spring. Spring taunts, then scurries south. Winter again bangs its wind against the house, throwing shards of ice into the street, then cold rain. Gray, all I know of the sky. Frozen, what I know of earth. Then green, so sudden and bright. How to love. She entered the world knowing how to be surprised by every light and voice. I ask her, how can you love the world when the world is ill? Batting her eyes, she speaks a word, tugel, something she's created when she doesn't know the answer. Pretty day outside, she says, turning her face toward the glass door. It's true, the sun is shining. A chipmunk scatters across our line of vision. The cat chatters and swishes his tail, excited by the opportunity of a chase, which may never happen, but nevertheless, he's flattened his body, just in case. The child sidles up to the cat, places her arm around him, and strokes his fur. They look into the world together, watching its movements carefully, as if something wonderful could happen. The bend and rise of streets. The white inside wing of a gull gave brightness to the gray street this morning, fluttering between parked cars as I passed, then the sudden rising up, the pivotal turn away from me. Wings open, dark eyes between that wingspan, the flight so certain and fluid I lost direction. I stuttered and slowed the car and shook off following, let memory be my compass in this bend and rise of streets. On this road, 2 stop signs, then a right turn at the flashing signal, up the steep hill, another right at the gravel road. I could remember street names, but my body recalls more easily the upward slope of a hill or the bend within a curved road. I lean and turn, a gull heading north for the summer. A car and a current, a path and a migratory pattern. Goldenrod and pine trees blur into gray bridges and roads. We're getting ready to switch gears, people. I haven't read the Poems from Earthlust, I don't think anywhere. And that book is coming out in September. And I've got postcards for it if you're interested. I have some I'll give up for the read. This book's different because it's not really about family. I decided that after I finished Small Chimes and after I finished the chapbook, that I wanted to take a different direction because I got bored. And I'm not a person who likes to be bored. I get bored very easily, which is why I always have to change things. But I had been reading some feminist texts, and I started reading fairy tales because a lot of my friends write about fairy tales, and Mary McMinn is one of them sitting in this audience. And I got really interested about how I could tell a story in a different way without using the first person. And then I got really interested in how we navigate the world of desire, whether it's sexual desire, whether it's desire put on us from patriarchal constructions, whether it's something that we want or whether people want for us. So I started thinking about all those things and thought of different scenarios I could put women in. Of course, fairy tales comes into this very, very, not heavily, but there's a lot of it in the book. But I started putting women into situations. Some of those women were in first person, some of them were in second person, some of them were in third person. So just playing around with point of view. But so these are going to be different, but they're going to be very much like I already do narratives, so you're going to have like scenes. But I will give you background on, when we get to the fairy tale poems, I'll give you background if you're not familiar with the story. Cinderella's in here, Snow White's in the new stuff, and there's one called The Maiden Without Hands, which some people aren't familiar with, so I'll give you some background on that when we get there. But just to let you know, it's different, and I like it. I'm very happy with it. It's a lot of fun for me to kind of get out of my comfort zone. So the first one is called On Display, and I'll talk about the inspiration for this poem because I just thought about it when I was reading the poems before I came here. But at any rate, this is called On Display. Down the road, a gas station, and outside, a vending machine hanging empty. If the racks inside are still unfilled, the lights still gleaming behind that glass, I'll break in, rip out the tiny compartments, shelve my petite body. I'll wear a sequined dress and whiten my teeth, and the light will illuminate my glittering eyeshadow, the mica, and my blush. I'll be shipped from place to place, a treasure, someone to notice. Among these fields, I notice only the wind, the way it whips around the house, flaking the paint job. So a couple of things. I remember going to a reading at Talquamin Library, or Newberry. It was Newberry, so it's the Talquamin Library, and seeing vending machines empty. And I was like, oh, what if somebody actually fit in there? So I mean, really the weirdest things, I'm telling you, will inspire the poems. And then I know a friend who had lived out in Pickford had told me the way the wind sounds out there. It doesn't sound out in the country like it does here. And the way she could just hear it just roaring and kind of scraping on the ground. I was like, oh wow, it's really interesting. So really, this, I can really say that the Sioux has had a huge influence on me. The next poem is actually inspired by a fairy tale, which is about a boy who, the title of the fairy tale is The Boy Who Went Forth to Learn What Fear Was. And the boy, actually, his father wants him to go out to actually learn how to be afraid. And he's never really afraid of anything until the end of the story where his wife dumps a bucket full of fish on him and then he gets the shivers. But as I was reading the story, I thought, well, what if the story was about a girl? What are the sorts of things that girls and women are afraid of? And so that's what started this poem. And this poem is called If You Had Never Known Fear. If you had never been told what to avoid, where not to walk at night. If you had never heard stories of girls who went out alone, the violent endings that kept you hyper-aware and vigilant. If your body could be something other than desire's object. If you could be taller. If you could throw a punch and land it squarely. If you could run faster. If you had been born a force, your body meant to be muscle, all strength. Your mind must be able to expel ghosts and their haunts, the images men create. You must notice shadows that move toward you among dark streets. You must learn every street and alley, every corner. If you had never known fear, then you would not know how to organize the city, your own neighborhood, which route might be quickest in the event. You must never finish that sentence. You must avoid the dead end. Wildfire. The wind carried smoke into town 2 days after the fire began. It was ravenous. I knew that hunger. If it were like mine, it would not be contained. The fire would race over dry pine needles, scorched trunks, drive birds and mammals out. I read that rangers were creating backfires and flying scoop ship planes over the forest. I breathed in smoky air, deliberated driving to meet it, just to watch. And of course, that's the Talquamin and the forest fires we had about 2 years ago. Was it the Duck? No, is that right?
Duck Lake?
Duck Lake, yeah, that fire, yeah, I remember smelling that. So, yeah. Actually, after I'd written that poem, I did a reading out at Talquamin. I did the reading out at Newberry, and I was like, I can't read this poem because it just happened. I was like, they're going to think I'm a freak reading a wildfire poem, and it just your forest almost burned down. Friday night. There were too many sounds offering themselves among the crowd. So you chose one that revved and sputtered, a motorbike to be taken to dirt roads. With a friend, you took it onto the streets after sunset, after workers had come home and eaten supper and televisions flickered from front rooms. You made a ruckus of the night, shouting and laughing, your friend giving the small motor speed while you held on, arms wrapped around his torso, the first boy who'd ever let you get so close. Friday night, flying among houses and trees, charging through a church parking lot, the air rippled your skin. The motor gasped as it slowed, as you reached the end. You hopped off and offered your seat to another girl, adrenaline still pulsing in you, the scent of the dark, its campfire smoke and dew in your hair. Now I'm going to read the title poem, Earthlust. I guess this is pretty good for tonight because it's about construction. So it's about seeing construction on the road. So yeah, it works. Now, this is called Earthlust, and this is the title poem of the collection. The men were at it until midnight, shining lamps into the dark earth, replacing and repairing pipes, cordoning off the area with orange cones. Passing by yesterday, you slowed, obeying recommended speed limits in work zones, but you also wanted to see their bodies half absorbed by earth. You wanted to stop and watch, their arms commanding shovels, one man driving the machinery that makes the ditch. You don't want to call it a ditch, a place where trash collects, or where you might end up if you lost control of your car. This is something made, the earth pushed up and back, then sifting down. This is why you wanted to stop. The smell of earth, men covered in dark clay and pushing it aside, piles of dirt at the edges of that deep path, bodies bending to disappear. From the back seat. I had to feel around to position myself. I touched cold metal handles and pulled at locks. Sometimes moonlight streamed in momentarily, or my husband clicked on a ceiling light to check the map. I could suddenly see the outlines of objects, a rearview mirror, knobs on the radio, all out of reach. In the passenger seat, my sleeping daughter's head rocked against the window. Once clouds swallowed the disk of moon, or my husband had his bearings again, the only lights left were headlight beams shining on the road ahead. Off to the side were other roads. We'll get some light in just a minute, don't worry. Navigation. If you were a ghost, you could walk through anything. You'd be a bit of air, a shadow. You could float among objects. But you are flesh and feel a touch of air when it moves past. You shiver from the darkness among the trees. You bump into things. Something like fear covers you when the sun sets, when you walk among houses in the outlying woods, when you cross pastures looking for street lamps or houses shining into their yards, a bit of light to lead you. The day warms you and runs its fingers down your face. It gives you sight, warning of a fallen tree in your way. At night, moonlight masked by the enclosure of trees, you listen to the sounds under your feet, the crack of branches and whispers of moving leaves. Hands held out in front of you, palms down, pace slackened, you learn to navigate the things you cannot see. In the woods. You with the fox between your teeth. You in the woods, bending toward the ground. You are not grounded, others say. You are not practical. You are unmoored. You should tie yourself down. You should live in a house full of objects. You stare into the mouths that make these statements. You scruff the fox kit between your teeth, his tail twitches. You crawl on your hands and knees, rustling a floor of dry leaves. You turn your head to the deepness of the woods, a darkness no one else will enter. That brings us now to our fairy tale poems. The first one's about Cinderella, and it actually deals with both the Grimm Cinderella, where the white bird is, instead of fairy godmother, the white bird gives dresses to Snow White. That also deals with the Disney version as well. So you'll see, when you think of Cinderella, you'll see versions of this within the poem. This is called In Soot. This is a dream, this tale. I may have danced all night, but those riches were borrowed. I never gave my name out of self-preservation and knew where to hide. In the story of my life, the one I am telling now, I tame birds with food and soft words, and a white bird grants my wishes. I walk as if I wear a shimmering dress from the bird, though I'm covered in soot. I sleep in the ash created when I burn the scenes you know by heart, the songs you learned to sing in the voice of mice. I burn the fairy godmother and her wand and the barnyard, what you thought you knew. I believed in a white bird, and he turned out to be white dandelion seeds, blown away by wish. The next one's taken from the Minstrels Daughter, which actually is called this. It's based on a story called The Marvelous Minstrel. It's a Grimm's fairy tale, and you'll get the gist of it in the poem. But I thought when I was reading the story, I thought, well, what if I didn't really like the things that the Marvelous Minstrel did to the animals in the story. I mean, he kind of changed them down so they won't follow him while he's actually playing his lute or his, I can't remember. I haven't read it in a while. He's playing his instrument and he's always luring animals through the forest with the instrument. That's what minstrels do. But he wants humans to follow him, not animals. So he ties them to trees or he puts rocks on their feet. I was like, that's really mean. So I was thinking, what would his daughter say if she'd heard this? So this isn't her. This is about her. It's not her voice, but it's in third person. So I have a little quote from The Marvelous Minstrel, but this is called The Minstrels Daughter. So the quote is, "Here comes the right companion at last," said the minstrel. "I never wanted beasts in the first place, just humans." She wanted what he didn't, the wolves and foxes and hares of the forest. She wanted their thick coats, their paws, their noses against her skin, surrounding her, whispering against her ear. She'd heard that wolves would harm her, but she'd also heard of boys raised by wolves and took her chances. She knew the minstrel's tune was a trick, a lure. In case they ever found themselves charmed by his song, she taught the animals how to pull their paws out from under stones and how to cut strings that tied them to the trees, his way of not letting them follow. Once she entered the forest, she never returned home. Her hair grew long and became a coat or cloth. Her voice became soft, a set of sounds. When she needed to call out, her voice became a horn echoing through the trees, not toward the hunt, but away from it. I'm going to read two poems from a 4-poem sequence based on The Woman Without Hands. The poems are based on The Maiden Without Hands, which is a Grimm's fairy tale, which is actually about, I think if you guys haven't read this, it's probably one of the creepiest tales. Just don't read it before bed because you'll dream about it like me and end up writing poems the next day. But it's about a woman whose father makes a deal with the devil and cuts off her hands in payment. And then she ends up leaving home and she has to go because she can't live at home. She won't live around her father. So she leaves and she has to kind of navigate the world without her hands, but she has help from an angel. So I do include the angel in some of the poems. But there's some really beautiful scenes in the story. And her hands do grow back at the very end. And she's given silver hands by her husband, who is a king, of course. But I'm not going to read that poem. But so it's a very interesting story. But I ended up calling the sequence "The Woman Without Hands" because even though she's a maiden, when her hands are cut off, she also becomes pregnant. She also marries. So I was thinking the woman without hands really kind of echoes what she has to go through as a person. So the first poem is "The Woman Without Hands as a Ghost." She walks through an orchard at night, eating pears. Darkness hides the stumps of arms bound behind her, while she uses the muscles of her tongue and the points of her teeth to pull the fruit down. One night, a man sees her walking among the trees and believes she's an apparition. A real woman would have fingers and thumbs. She would cup the pear in her hand, grasp and pull it from the branch gently, then bring it to her mouth. She would not steady the fruit between her teeth with her tongue. She would not take bites from a hanging pear like a beast. And as she has a baby and being a mother, I thought, how is she going to nurse that kid? And she does nurse the baby. She actually does nurse the baby. I was thinking, how in the world is she going to do that? And the angel actually holds the baby up to her breast to nurse. But I was also thinking about all the things that mothers do when they nurse their children and how tactile of an experience that is and how and just how physical an experience that is, and how she can't have that. So this poem is based on that thinking about that kind of experience. And the story doesn't go into that, but that's what poems are for. The woman without hands touches her infant. He would slip from her arms. She has no hands to stop his fall, so he's strapped to her back. When the angel, her helper, unstraps the baby and holds him to the woman's chest to nurse, the woman cannot stroke his skin. She leans down to smell him, taking long inhalations of his sweetness. When he has finished nursing, she asks the angel to hold him up to her. Cheek to cheek, nose to nose, forehead to forehead, she nuzzles him like an animal. She cannot sling him around to her back like a bear. She cannot claw or punch, cannot quiet or soothe, except with the sound of her voice. That must be a kind of power, like the wind that strokes her face and knocks branches from trees. That's Earthlust. I'm going to read you some new stuff and then we'll stop. The new stuff is kind of connected to Earthlust. After I finished Earthlust, I kept thinking, I was working on I'm not going to read all these poems, don't worry. I'm just going to read a couple. As many as I have time for. I'll hurry it up. I'll kind of skip through. But when I finished Earthlust, and Earthlust actually had been a full manuscript, and then I took some things out and just made it into a chapbook. But then after I finished that, after I finished writing about the ways we navigate desire, I started thinking about female friendships and the ways in which women treat each other, whether it's negative or whether it's positive. And I think as we grow older, we really tend to have more of a community of women than we do when we're younger. When we're younger, it's more about boyfriends and, the hunt for a companion or a mate. So I really wanted to think about the ways in which women treat each other. And most of this came from reading fairy tales where the stepmothers are really cruel to the daughters, or the stepsisters are cruel. And I just thought about how there's no sense of sisterhood, really, in Grimm's fairy tales. There are a little bit where women, and I do write about this later in the book. I'm not going to read those poems tonight because they're not finished. But there are some places where women do save each other, but it's usually when they're dismembered. And the old woman puts another woman's body back together. So it's very interesting. I'm reading Grimm's fairy tales and thinking about my own experience with other female friends. But it's interesting to think about, how we treat each other as women, because if we are going to be in a world of men, we have to think about, well, what about our own experience, and how do we make connections with other people, and how do we get support? And in a lot of ways, I get support from other women. I have my husband for support too, but I think community of women is very, very important for women in general. So I'm going to read some poems from the very beginning of what I'm working on right now. And the first part of the book is about the friendship, and then it goes into the friends kind of background, and then it goes more into the relationships and the community of women, which I'm still working on. But the poems are mostly in second person, and they're talking to a you. And they do include an I a lot, and then later on in the book they'll include we. But I'm playing around with point of view on this one. And they're different. They said they're going to sound different, and they're just different. I'll be interested to see what you think if you want to talk to me about them after. But they're still in process, let's just put it that way. You're domestic. While I stayed at your house, I never saw you emerge from the bathroom fresh from a shower or from your bedroom, your hair wild with sleep. I never saw you cook or eat in the kitchen. One evening I came back in time to see you brush your teeth beside your son. I told you about a poet's house I visited, where poems were written on ceiling tiles and walls, words covering every white space. I looked at the walls of your living room and imagined aloud what you could write, but you wanted to leave them untouched. You preferred poems in your head and on the page where they belonged. You wanted nothing in your life that was not fully formed or in its place. I thought of graffiti on city walls and bus stops, but wouldn't mention them. I went back to the room where I slept and did not see you the next morning when I left for good. You left no note saying goodbye, no words outside your head or mouth. Your game. At a ball game, I asked a coach the rules of baseball and the colors of his team. Bored, you put on lipstick. The coach explained every move while yelling at his players. You adjusted the shoulders of your jacket. The coach and I exchanged phone numbers. You pulled me away towards downtown, where we visited your friends at a dance studio. While they practiced, you recited the names of ballet movements, some of which I knew. You looked pleased to teach me something and asked if I planned to call that coach. You said you would never date a jock and mentioned you knew some artists who were single, painters and writers, men who created important pieces of art with their hands. What about a carpenter or an architect? I asked, but you didn't know any. What about a mechanic or plumber? I asked, since they repair important objects with their hands. You frowned. You wanted someone specific for me. You thought you knew what I needed. I didn't mind dating a coach, I said, even if all he talked about was baseball, even if that was all he lived for. There would be passion and practice involved in the living and the telling. The junk of this world. You wait to replenish until the expiration date or until you run out of necessities. I stay greedy, in love with the junk of this world, its lights and noises, and the smell of fried food hanging over a restaurant. I like the cheap trinkets at discount stores, the weight of something new in my hand. You easily pass shelves of small statues, painted clowns or birds. You need only look once to know whether you want it. I hold a small vase that will hold next to nothing. You claim it dust-worthy, garage sale imminent. Your house stretches wide and spare, everything in its place. I am a pack rat with a heart for the eclectic. I'll drown, you say. There's nothing but suffocation in my future. She's not always mean. They do connect. In another country, we took a shortcut through a small overgrown lawn to reach a castle built by London architects in 1800. Feral cats scattered, avoiding us, and mice scurried over and under our feet. I had never traveled outside America. You liked how I described my new surroundings, the minute details I noticed. Cats watched us from overgrown hedges. Stray dogs bared their teeth, while black snakes curled around their necks like collars. I knew the snakes were not venomous, but a dog bite could be deadly. We stepped lightly and slowly, with no sudden movements. Fever. My temperature clocked at 102 and kept rising. I went to work anyway, manned a desk, took room reservations, and oversaw meetings until I left for home, delirious. Later, you called, wanting to go out. I could not tell you I was sick. I pulled my limp body to the car. At your house, you were changing clothes. You bared your skin, but I felt ill. I could not go to a karaoke bar or nightclub, so I told you I needed to drive with open windows. I took a dirt road through a wooded area and landed at a music festival where costumes were for sale, some couture. I touched the cloth of what I could not have, silk, cashmere, gabardine. I sank into their softness and fell asleep curled under racks of clothes, dreaming and sweating. Incident. I had an iron will and believed myself invincible until a friend was attacked walking home late from a party. When she shut herself away, her friends showed up at her door. I never stood on the shoulders of other women. When those women showed up at my friend's house, they wanted to offer comfort, and she accepted by letting them in. They bandaged her wounds. One woman left a light on when my friend went to sleep now, since she hated the dark. When you gave me a scolding for going home with a man after a party, I heard your tone, but not your words. I recalled the elbows of other girls digging into my side and the dirt their shoes kicked at me. Women walked in and out of my friend's house, a second car always parked in the driveway. I wondered what I had to offer. Roses from the trellis? A heart scrawled on cardstock? Or was this something I would have to learn? The open door. This is a little bit of her background. We'll read a couple from this. Your mother's house. Your mother held her head like a broken object. You played the radio at a low volume and told me not to sing along. Even when I whisper song, you hushed me, afraid I would get too loud. I helped you make your bed. When I pulled the fitted sheet away, I found sheets of paper secured to the mattress and covered in notes. I slipped a fingernail under a piece of tape to remove a page, but you stopped me. You stretched clean sheets over the mattress, and under the white cotton your handwriting appeared straight and crooked, neat then illegible. When I asked about it, you shook your head, leaving me to interpret your script and your gestures. A house kept so silent did not allow for thinking aloud, so I could not make quick deductions. I walked around your room and studied the neat arrangement of objects. And fairy tale poems are also in this one, and I'm going to read a few of those, and then I'll stop. Because I wanted to think about the ways in which women are treated, but also think about, okay, well, how can fairy tales help me tell that story? And this one is based on Snow White. This is called You Burn. When you were a child, you believed everyone good, a friend. Your skin pale, you could not face the sun for long, so your father kept you inside. He told your stepmother you were fragile, your skin burned easily. On the brightest days of summer, she took you out on horseback or for picnics and took away the hat that shielded your face. You came back blistered, skin matching the blood of your lips, and went to bed. Your father treated your sores with salve. When they healed, your stepmother took you out again. Every day you burned. Every day you thought she didn't know any better. But this next one is based on the Chinese Cinderella story, which there's a stepmother, but there's also a fish that the girl feeds, and he is killed by the stepmother, but he comes back and gives her gifts, kind of like the fairy godmother and the white bird do. This is called Red Scales. You named him, and the fish outgrew every bowl you could find. His fins overlapped each rim, and water rippled out when he tried to move. You threw him into the pond behind your house, where he sank to the bottom and waited for you to call. When you did, his large head rose out of the water and planted its face in your lap. You stroked the red scales around his mouth. You fed him scraps after every meal. One afternoon, your stepmother wore your clothes and his name on her lips and killed him. You dug up the bones from his grave and hid them under your bed. Whenever you prayed out of despair or desired something you knew you could not have, those bones rattled. They gave you food. They gave you pearls. They sent a gown of kingfisher feathers, and when you stroked its plumage, you felt his scales at your fingertips, the rise and fall of his breath. Only two more. This is a really weird one. This one came about by seeing a picture of Princess Anne's dress in National Geographic. And so I got a little obsessed with royals after that for a little while, but that kind of went away. But it was just really interesting to see. It was her dress in a room, a really highly decorated room, but it was a mannequin without a head and without arms, just dress and legs in the middle of a room. And so I was writing these poems at that time, and so I got interested in that. This is called The Room of Ornaments. You want to be more than a dress and a pair of legs. A ribbon circles your waist and ruffles decorate your shoulders. You stand on wall-to-wall red carpet in the middle of a large room, ornaments on every wall. 2 crystal chandeliers, fully lit, hang from the ceiling. You are the only person in the room. You want to walk instead of stand still. When you were a child, your mother would not let you attend a large party held in her honor. You remember the fanfare in the street below your window and being confined to a room. Here you are again. Your body casts 2 shadows behind you, one for the present and one for the past, from which you cannot remove yourself. And this next one is based on the grim story of 6 swans, and there's little bits of the story throughout. This is the last one. And thank you guys so much for coming in. It's been nice to meet all my friends tonight. This one is called These Stories. When your mother taught you how to sew a hemline, she told you the story of a girl sworn to silence to save her brothers. You did not know what it meant. She told you it was just a story, but you knew every tale had meaning. When your grandmother taught you how to knit, she told you the story of a girl who wove 7 small shirts of asters to save her brothers. You asked what it meant, the saving of the brothers, but she said it was a legend her mother passed down. You knew your brother was strong enough to save himself. He lifted weights and the outline of his muscles rippled under his shirt sleeves. You knit a winter hat out of black yarn which would keep him from catching cold. You hemmed his pants when they were too long, and he told you the story of a woman burned at the stake. It is just a tale, he claimed. You tell me these stories. You teach me how to pierce and thread. Thank you, guys.
So our first reader tonight is Renee Drilling, and by golly, it's good to see you. So,
Thank you. I brought a stack just because I have a few that I haven't read anywhere yet, and I wanted to practice them, and I'll probably weed them out as I go. But I have a series of 3 all about a character named Ivy, and I just wanted to read them tonight. First one is called Ivy at 30. Jealous of gypsies, but ever mindful of manipulative madcaps, she hides her secret hankerings, hoards them like heirlooms, while they threaten to seep through her pores, a rising flood against a wall of sand. She crosses prairies of after-dinner conversations on crowded furniture. Shrouded heirlooms demand her protective consideration. Potted plants require her daily precise waterings. Each Sunday she tends the graves of all of her ancestors. Maternal admonitions of reckless rapscallions guided her choosings among blue-blooded suitors, none patient enough to win the nuptial night prize. Now, an anate of her own inheritance, she dreams of bell-bottomed bohemians, while gently growing more echoic. And from that kind of drab existence, Ivy finally made her escape. This is called Ivy Runs Away. His talk was gentle, so she thought he would be also. Gave her virginity in a motel on the way to Mexico, a bit too dusty to be paradise. Slap, slap. She hid her tears and hoped for the best. He told her that he loved her as she signed over the deed. Years later, she'd still wonder how such sweet eyes could hide such greed. Now, Ivy rents a room and cleans for former friends with blood as blue. Dusting is her specialty. In the quiet of the nights, she imagines her whispered "I love you" as an echo. And after that guy took her house and everything she owned, things got a little rougher for Ivy. And Ivy talks about poverty. You can't tell me I'm privileged simply because I'm white. I used to be privileged, white, and rich, but then I became poor, and I was no longer privileged. My only child, my precious daughter, was born in poverty, and has been called a dirty Indian, a dirty little nigger, dark-skinned, but not that it matters. When you are poor, in the eyes of the privileged, you are dirty somethings. I worked as a menial servant to families from my parents' former social circles. It's a hard thing to be treated as less than equal. It's hard to be poor. For years I denied my poverty, thought it was just a mistake. I used to be rich, white, and privileged, but my family left me more status than money. Then I lost everything in one foolish gamble on love, and it took years for me to understand just how impoverished I was. I was forced to swallow my pride. There was often precious little food or drink to go with it. Through it all, I think I've learned a few things. They who are not me and I am not one of them, called my child a dirty Indian. They called my child a dirty little nigger. They rejected us both for being poor. They have so much to learn. They have so much to atone for. And recently I managed to finish another one that's been in the back of a notebook for a lot of years. And this is called Escher-esque, if any of you are familiar with the artist M.C. Escher. I read all of your words, swear I thought of them myself a split second before I read them. Forgive me my small conceits in a world where it seems I struggle with a few paltry words, while everyone else can write and play and sing and dance and act and paint, all while giving birth to twin prodigies. My bleeding heart bleeds only for its selfish self. Square heart, stuffed into a round hole, stifled, muffled, and muzzled. But my stubborn heart, seemingly pounded into submission, lies passive, silent, flat upon the page, until it rises up, empowered, inspired, as art comes to life and devours you. Last weekend, Al and I went camping at the lake that I grew up on. I haven't been back there in 4 years since my parents moved. And the house is torn down and there's not much there for what used to be home, but the lake, just the lake pretty much. It's called home. It doesn't matter if you can't go back there. You can never leave. It sticks like a burr to your pant leg, like gum to the bottom of your shoe. It's the sand in your shorts. You know it in your bones, in the pulse of your blood. You feel it when you're almost asleep and the instant before you wake up. You hear it in the waves' rough slap, and the next moment's waves' gentle lap. In the rush of the wind, the stillness of the dusk, the hum of the sometimes constant, sometimes erratic traffic. You fear for it in the pre-dawn knock on the door alarm of a fire. You know it in every tree's leaf and every grass blade, every note of birdsong, every rustle of wildlife, and every fish's splash. Home. You can never leave there. You can never really leave. Thank you.
And next is Alan Seymour.
Thank you, Ken. Hi, I'm Alan. Usually I'm Renee's boyfriend. I don't do this, but there's not many of you, so you get to suffer with me tonight because I feel safe. And I want to do a poem by, I'm a folk singer and I do memorize songs of, so this is one that was written by a guy named Sean Phillips. This last week a guy was being prosecuted for crimes in Northern Ireland, but this is called A Song for Northern Ireland. Come to thee the peace of a green and lovely island, if you please, where the gorse is brightly growing in the middle of the morning, with the sweeping hills around you, and time it cannot bind you. With the cattle grazing slowly, the sun is setting lowly, and such a golden sun above thee, when rain is not upon thee. The emerald glint abounds thee, and the colors dust astound thee. Can you see them through the bloodbath? Can you see them through the tears your people shed? The wrath of God now smolders, and the weight's upon your shoulders, and the weight is never ending till you stopped all the killing. Don't you see? We have cheerful moments in our house, really. We don't just write that, no. And this other one I want to do is by Tom Waits. I think in like 1981 he wrote this. Frank's not here, so I'll dedicate this to Frank. No, I'm not going to do that. It is called Frank. It's not warm and fuzzy either, I'll warn you. But Frank settled down in the valley. He hung his wild years in the nail he drove through his wife's forehead. He sold used furniture on the San Fernando Road. $30,000 down, 15.25%. Put a down payment on a little 2-bedroom bungalow down the valley. His wife was a used piece of jet trash. Mixed good Bloody Marys, kept her mouth shut most of the time. She had some little chihuahua. He had some kind of skin disease. He was totally blind. Yeah, they had a thoroughly modern kitchen, self-cleaning oven, the whole bit. He bought a little sedan, black, 2-door. They were so happy. One day on the way home from work, Frank stopped at the local liquor store and got him 2 Mickeys, wide mouths. Drank him on the way to the Shell gas station. Got himself a gallon of gas and a can. Went home, doused everything in the house. Laughing, parked across the street. He torched it. He watched it burn all chimney red and Halloween orange. And Frank put on the top 40 station, heading out to San Fernando Road, headed north. Never did like that dog. Never did like that dog. Oh, don't be so sad. I'm sorry, you guys. Thank you.
And our last reader today is Nicole Van.
So I've never actually read in front of people like this, so I am a little bit nervous. And I only brought my little orange journal, which is pretty new. I brought it so that I could keep writing down my thoughts. And I've got 2 poems in there. And the first one is called I Remember. I remember. I remember the first time I met Love. He was a long-haired, didn't care, pale guy, and had a knack for making me remember. I remembered homework because Love said it was more important than lunch. I remembered that I would only be beautiful when Love said I was. And I remembered the first time that Love said I needed to lose weight. And I did. But for Love, my weight loss wasn't enough power. He wanted to have control of a situation to cope with the fact that he had no control over his own life. So I let Love control me. You see, I didn't care if I was blue one day, or black the next, or green the day after that. Love needed me. I remember the first time that Love put me in my place. Love put his hand against my face because of a glass of water that was spilled, and I put my face against the floor because that's what he wanted. Love said he was sorry. He said, "Oh, I love you. I'm sorry. Never again." "How much have you eaten? You look pale. Eat." You see, I wanted to make Love happy because I didn't want to live without him. He was all I had, and he told me what my friends said behind my back. He was all I could have ever imagined having left. Now I remember a lot of things. Like when he forced me against the railing and threatened to put me over if I told, knowing full well I couldn't swim. And when he forced me against the ground in an abandoned classroom and put his hands on my body that belonged to me. You see, when I let Love go, he made sure that I would know just how worthless I was. But when I met Love, real love for the first time, and realized that love wasn't what he claimed, I haven't stopped waiting for real love, true love, to tell me that I'm enough. Because when he does, what I thought was love can be defeated. And then the next one is called Addendum to the first man I ever loved. To the first boy I ever loved, I do not hate you. I don't hate the way you told me that your friend had a good reason for putting his tongue down my throat. I do not hate you for trying to be with me. I do not hate you for scarring me. I only hate that I can't thank you. Thank you for making me realize that what you and your friend did to me wasn't my fault. To my second love, I do not hate you. Hate is a very strong word. I do not hate the way you pressed me against the water's edge and tried to get to second base. I do not hate that you called me fat. And I don't hate that you still occasionally drunk call me. I only hate that I can't thank you. Thank you for giving me strength to realize that I am better than your standards, even though sometimes my food is still hard to swallow. To the only boy I ever used for my own personal gain, I hope you don't hate me. Even though I led you on for a few months, and when I left I said that you were never what I wanted. I only hate that I can't thank you for helping me. You were there when my pale ex came back, and you never judged me for what they did to me. To my new love, I think I might love you, but I'm afraid. I still blame myself, even though I know it's not my fault. I still want to starve, even though you insist that I am beautiful. And I still flirt with other guys and hug them and sometimes make unclean remarks to them because I'm insecure. I hope you don't end up hating me for those insecurities, because I think that maybe I love you. Addendum to the first man I ever loved. I could never hate you.
First time, eh?
Yeah.
I don't believe you. Very good.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of our open mic readers tonight. Thank you very much. Julie, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. Remember, ML Liebler is coming on, what's the day, Susan?
The 14th.
14th of August. And Mary McMinn on October 7th, right? So thank you all and good night.